Now let's talk about box and whisker plots. A box and whisker plot, or box plot, is the graph of the 5-number summary. There's only one axis on it. You can stack multiple box plots on top of each other to compare data. They visually show where the bulk of the data falls and give an idea of how spread out the data is. They can also be drawn vertically or horizontally. Box plots do turn up a lot in a lot of different research papers. If you are taking any type of class that requires you to do any sort of research that involves reading any studies, you're going to encounter box and whisker plots. I guarantee you this. Now that I've told you how important box plots are, because you probably will see them in other courses you're taking. I know you took this class because you never want to take math again in your life, but you will see box plots. We'll talk about how to construct box plots now. First, you want to title it. You will lose points for not titling it, but if you give me a title and you don't graph anything else, you will get pity points just for remembering to include a title. That works both ways. Second step, draw the x-axis, label it with appropriate units, and label it with a scale that works for the data you have. And by works, we'll see what we mean with that when we get to some examples. Step 3, above the axis, place dots above the values corresponding to the values in the 5-number summary. 4, draw vertical lines through Q1, the median, and Q3, then connect them to form a box. Step 5, draw horizontal lines connecting the minimum to Q1 and Q3 to the maximum to draw the whiskers. So a box and whisker plot, you'll have some type of scale. Right here I'm just doing an x-axis. Here I'm counting by 5s. What number you decide to count by, what scale you decide to use, will generally depend on the values you end up getting in your 5-number summary. You don't want them too close together, and you don't want them too spaced out, because that can make the graph difficult to draw. This could be a minimum. Let's say we have a maximum over here, and these correspond, to a value between 5 and 10, or between 25 and 30. Let's say we have Q1. Let's say this is our median. And let's say this is Q3, really close to the maximum. You would draw vertical lines through these guys, connect them to make a box, and then connect these to form the whiskers. So this is generally what a box and whisker plot looks like. Let's look at an example now. Let's construct a box plot for the 5-number summary we found in example 1 of the 5-number summary video. So the 5-number summary that we had in that example was if we look at these values, we notice they're spaced fairly out. We have a pretty big range. Our range is 90, our minimum is 17, our maximum is 97. So maybe for a scale in this problem, we might want to count by 10s. So we'll start off by drawing our horizontal axis. We'll just label this X for now. The data that we got this 5-number summary from didn't have any story connected with it. If we were told that these were ages or inches or some other specific unit of measure, we would need to label our x-axis with whatever those units are. So if it's ages in years, we would need to write years here. If it's height in inches, we would need to write inches here, or so on, whatever units they tell us. Now we're going to start by, let's count by 10s. So we've labeled our axes. We need a title for this. So we'll just title it box plot title. Again, if you're told that the data has to do with something specific, you should give the box plot a title having to do with whatever the data is about. And now we'll go about marking the 5-number summary on our graph here. So we'll mark points for each of these. So our minimum is at 17, so that's going to be a little bit closer to 20, between 10 and 20, closer to 20. Q1 is 21.5. So that's going to be between 20 and 30, but pretty close to 20. Our median is 47, so that's going to be between 40 and 50, but closer to 50. Q3 is 84, so that will be between 80 and 90, but close to the middle and a little bit closer to 80. And then our maximum is 97, so that's going to be between 90 and 100, but a little bit closer to 100. Now we would draw vertical lines through where we have Q1, through our median, and through Q3, and then connect them to make a box. Then we would draw the whiskers, so we connect Q3 to the max, and we connect the minimum to Q1. So this would be the box plot for this data. We could also further label it like this. And we could say we have our max here, that's 97, just in case that wasn't clear. Q3 is equal to 84, median is 47, Q1 is 21.5, and minimum is 17. Here's another example. Suppose n equals 7 anime nerds were asked how many anime figures they own. This yielded the following data sample. Find the 5-number summary and construct a box plot for this data. So to find our 5-number summary, we would have to first range these from lowest to highest. You could also find the 5-number summary from your calculator. So we have our minimum is 0. We know our maximum is 10. We do have a middle value here, it's 2. And here we can see Q1 is going to be 1, and Q3 will be 5. So this is our 5-number summary. Now we're going to use the 5-number summary to construct the box plot. All of these values are fairly close together. The 10 is far away, but the other values are pretty close, so we can probably space this out using units of 1. So we'll start by drawing our axis. And here a unit would be number of figures. We could title it something like, I don't know, like anime figures that nerds have. That's our title. And now we'll start to plot the points from the 5-number summary here. Oh, right, we'll label our axis first. Let's start 0. And now we'll start to plot our points from the 5-number summary on the graph. So our minimum is 0, so that gets a point. Our maximum is 10, that gets a point. Median is 2, that gets a point. Q1 is 1, that gets a point. Q3 is 5, that gets a point. And now we need to form our box. And we would connect to form the whiskers. So this would be our box plot for this data. And now let's talk about what information we can learn about the data just from looking at a box plot. If we see how long this whisker is over here between Q3 and the maximum, that tells us the top 25% of the data is very spread out because of how long this whisker is. This whisker between the minimum and Q1 is very short. That tells us the data over here is grouped more closely together. And we can see that from looking at our data over here. The lower half of the data, 0, 1, 1, is grouped a lot more closely together than the upper half of the data, 3, 5, 10. This is more spread out, that's grouped more closely together. Even going from the minimum to the median, that's a lot shorter distance than it is from the median to the maximum. Going from the minimum to the median and it being a short distance here tells us that the lower half of the data here, the lower 50%, is grouped a lot more closely together than the upper half of the data is. Actually, yeah, if we include the 2 in that. So from 2 to 10 is a lot more spaced out than from 0 to 2 is. So even without looking at the data, there are some things that we can determine about it. And let's say that we had several samples, you could stack these box plots on top of each other and compare data to each other.